I'm going to talk about today is I'm going to talk about using some sort of atypical methods to bind data to forms. Alpha's given us some tremendous ways to do this. The first is with data binding, and of course, if I open up this little component, I'll just show this to you in just a minute. But I just want to go here. You have data binding here, where you can bind data with various methods, and then the other method is to use a list to bind it. But sometimes your situation is either so complex or maybe even so simple that you want to do it a little differently. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And so what I have here is I obviously didn't spend any time on the look or layout of this form. So the look and feel of this is not tremendous, but it gets the idea across. And so what I have here is, in order to make this as portable as possible, I'm using the Northwind database from Microsoft. And in order to do that, I also, I made the SQLite version of that. And I did that by starting the connection string. And if you're not familiar with how to do that, that's real simple. And we can go into that if any of you have any questions at the end on how to do it. But then in order to view the data easily, I went into Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio, and I made what's called a server object and a linked server. And I have a SQLite linked server here. And if you want to see how that works, the properties of this are basically, the first thing you have to do is create an ODBC connection. So I created an ODBC connection to that SQLite server. And to do that, I just basically had to tell the ODBC connection where that is. And this is where Alpha put it by default. So I just left it there. And it was pretty easy to hook this up. The only thing that's not quite as normal as we usually think of things in SQL Server is that we have to sometimes query it a little bit differently. And so when we query it, the way we query it is, because this is a linked server, we say select star from open query and then SQLite. The SQLite refers to SQLite here. This basically opens a query, and here's the query within here. And because it's in quotes, we have to double quote 2 single quotes, not 1 double quote. And I'm not going to say any more because that's just going to get more and more confusing. But we need to quote the character fields with 2 single quotes in order to do that. And so this way we can query the SQLite database very easily if we want to. And so what I did basically here, as you can see, is I have the customer table from Northwind, and I have the orders table from Northwind. And right now I just have the order table filtered by this customer Welly. Of course, the way you would do this is you would normally tie it to this list, and you would create an argument, and the argument would change based on whichever row you had selected, and then that would change this list of orders down here. But I didn't go through all of that because there were some other things I just wanted to spend time on showing. So the first question is, when I open this, is how do I populate the 2 tables? Well, let's talk about that right now. So in this component, let's look at the controls we have here. I have list 1 and list 2, and the lists are in containers. I made a detail view for this first list, but you'll notice the second list does not have a detail view. This list is obtained. The data from this is basically obtained directly from the connection string, the fields from the table's customers, and here are the fields that I've chosen. And of course, here's the list layout with these 5 or so fields. And so that's how that's populated. But if you look at the server side, you can see that this is getting the detailed data here for the second list, because if you look at the second list is a static list. And sometimes, I know for the first couple of years I started using the UX component with lists, I never found a good use for a static list. But sometimes there are good uses for static lists. And so this static list was very easy to build. All it has is these fields here. And the way I actually got these fields was I really, you might say I sort of cheated, but all I did basically was I opened the text box and I said, populate the list from a table. So I opened this and I opened my connection string, and my connection string is the north wind. And then I unchecked all the binding information, but I just chose the table I wanted to get the details from. So from the orders table, I did this, and that just gave me a list of all the fields real quickly and easily. And then if I needed to, I could see anything that wasn't necessarily a character field. I copied all these, and then I used that to build my data table right here. And actually, I should have gone and changed this by saying equals n. Equals n. And what that refers to is that if you look here under the advanced options, the assumption is that all these fields are going to be character fields. But if they're not going to be character fields, then you should really indicate the type of fields they are by putting the equal sign and the letter corresponding to the type of field it is here. And that will help the list more effectively and efficiently create and let you be able to use it better. So I have this list here, which is a static list, and this is how I'm populating this static list on the server side. If you look at this, what it does basically is this is what does the heavy lifting. It's the lobj.append rows with JSON data. So if you want to if you want to go through this with the debug on, we can do that. It'll just take a moment. So I know this is very exciting. Try and contain your enthusiasm here. So basically, what I did was this gives me the number of records from the that are in the order table where the customer ID equals the ID I'm referring to. And so when I do this, the JavaScript here, as you can see, has all the data that I need for the particular order for this customer, WELLI. And Lee showed some of the tools he uses for various things. One of the things I often do is if I'm working with JSON data, I try and open up a JSON formatter. And there's a couple different JSON formatters you can use. I tried this one this week, and this works pretty good. This actually has some of my data left over, as you can see in it. And then you can validate the data and see if it validates correctly. And if it doesn't validate, it's going to give you an error and tell you what the error is. So that's often helpful to do that. And the other thing, while I'm on the topic of helpful websites, the other thing I've often found is the one concern I have, or not concern, one complaint I have about Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio is that it doesn't format data nicely at all. And so I often use a SQL formatter if I'm going to write SQL data, because I just think it's much easier to read if it's formatted correctly. So the SQL formatters will take a SQL statement, sort of no matter how it's written, and it will format it. Of course, Alpha does that nicely also in their does it nicely in the list itself as you're building it. So if I took this, is there a question?
No, keep going.
Okay. So if I took this and I put it in here, but I just went and sort of unformatted it a little bit, and you can see if I go format the SQL, it puts it back in a decent order, and you can dictate, the number of spaces and stuff like that. Anyways, so it's always nice to use a SQL formatter tool anyway when you're working too. So back to this. So then when we take this, basically the e.javascript takes this and stuffs it into my list. So that's really how I do it. And the way I got the JSON data in the first place was this alpha feature called RS to JSON.
So just a quick question. So -1 means get the very first record, right? Then the next -1 means get all records.
That's
I think that's
question.
what it means, because if you just put a 1 there, it would just get one record. I think that's what it means.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm going to have to go back to the documentation and verify that, but I think that's correct.